So this is section 2.2 of Algebra 1, and this is all about solving equations. So a good part of this is going to be a review. We're going to go back to where you first started in solving equations, but some of them we may push a little bit to be maybe not quite what you saw last year, but this is kind of where we land when we're actually in Algebra 1. Okay, so just as far as the basics, in order to solve equations, so these are my steps to solve equations. The first thing you want to do is simplify each side. And I should probably qualify what I mean by each side. When I say each side, I mean each side of the equal sign. So whatever is on the left, see if you can simplify that. Whatever's on the right of the equal sign, see if you can simplify that. Okay? So like, for example, on letter A, on the left, all I have is negative 18. There's nothing I can do to simplify that. And on the right, all I have is x minus 10. There's nothing I can do to simplify that. So I'll go on to step 2, which is to isolate the x terms. Okay, isolate the x terms. Well, what does isolate means? That means get the x's by themselves. So I'll say something like all x's on same side. Okay, that's what we mean by isolate. Get all of the x's on the same side. And again, when I say side, I mean the same side of the equal sign. Okay. Well, if you look at letter A, right now the x is on the right side, and that's fine for x to be on the right side. It's just that I want it to be by itself, right? I don't want the negative 10 to be over there. So how do we move things across the equal sign? Well, don't you always do the opposite operation? So if this is a minus 10, wouldn't I need to add 10 to both sides? And again, when I say both sides, I mean both sides of the equal sign. Okay, and so on the left side, I have negative 8. There's my equal sign. And on the right side, the 10s cancel, and all I have is x. And so step 3 would be, you combine any like terms, and like what we were saying, you solve by either adding and subtracting or by multiplying and dividing. So in this case, on letter A, once I got the x by itself, I was done, right? There was nothing else I had to do. X equals negative 8. Okay, if I look at letter B, I'm going to go through the steps. So step 1, simplify each side. Well, on the left side, can't I go ahead and say 3x plus 5x is 8x? On the right side, I can't combine the 6x and the 20, so I just leave it alone. 6x minus 20. So step 2, I need to get all the x's on one side. So how about, since I already have an 8x on the left, how about I figure out a way to move that 6x over with the 8x? Well, if that's a positive 6x, in order to move it over, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. So what I've actually got here is 8x minus 6x is 2x. Keep the equal sign. On the right side, all I have left is negative 20. Don't lose that negative sign that's in front of the 20. And then the last step, again, if I want the x by itself, how do I get rid of the 2? Well, right now that 2 is being multiplied by x. And so the opposite of multiplication is division. So what I end up with is x equals negative 20 over 2 is negative 10. Okay? Both of those types you may have done last year. We're starting to get into some that are a little more involved, right? When we get to letter C. So when I see this one, I'm thinking, okay, go through the steps. Step 1, simplify each side. So let's work on that left side. First thing I'm going to have to do is get rid of the parentheses. So I'll distribute. So 5 times 3 is 15. And then 5 times a, so plus 5a. Make sure you bring down all pluses or minuses as necessary. When I distribute that negative, it's going to become a negative 8a distributed over here, so it's going to become a negative 9. And then on the right side, I'll just bring down that 4a. Okay? But I'm still not done with step 1, right? I haven't simplified each side. So on the left side, let's combine our like terms. So for example, I've got 5a minus 8a is negative 3a. Also on the left, I have the positive 15 and the minus 9, which is positive 6, I believe. And then on the right side, I still have that negative 4a. Okay, so I want to get all my a's on one side. Here's what I'm thinking. I have a choice. I could just move this negative 3a over to this side, and that way I'd have all my a's on the right and none of them on the left. So I could do that in one step. If I wanted to, a lot of people might say, oh, I'm gonna add 4a. I'm gonna move the 4a over to the left side. But do you see, if you do that, you're still gonna have to move the 6 over to the right. So you're still gonna have two things to do. Either one will work. I just like to do it in the shortest amount of steps possible. So I'm thinking, how about if I add my 3a? If I add my 3a, then what I'm going to have on the right side is just a negative a. And on the left side, all I have is my positive 6. Now, I'm not done, because I don't want to solve for negative a. I want to solve for positive a. So there's kind of like this implied negative 1 right here in front of a. And so in order to solve, I have to divide both sides by that negative 1. So whatever's next to your variable is what you're going to divide by. And so the negative 1's cancel. On the left, 6 divided by negative 1 is negative 6. And on the right, all I have is a. And again, when you solve for your variable, it doesn't matter if that variable is by itself on the left or on the right. Okay? So when I look at letter D, I know there's a fraction in there, but that doesn't really affect the steps. So step 1 is simplify each side. Well, there's nothing I can do to the left. I can't combine those. They're not like terms. Step 2 is get the x terms by themselves. Well, so if I get the x over 5 by itself, I'm going to be subtracting 12. So I'm going to be left with x over 5 on the left. And if I subtract 12, I'm going to end up with negative 10 on the right. Okay, and so if I want to get that x by itself, right now this is x divided by 5. And so the opposite would be multiplication. So if I multiply both sides by 5, the 5's are going to cancel, and I'm just going to have x equals, remember I'm multiplying by 5, negative 50. Okay. So one step at a time as necessary. All right, here's a big old problem. Look at letter E. We start by simplifying each side. That may take a couple steps. So on the left side, I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 3. So 15x minus 6. Bring down the plus 10. On the right side, I'm going to go ahead and distribute that negative 2. So I've got the 6 there. If I distribute the negative 2, I'm going to have negative 2x. And then when I distribute it to the negative 7, it's going to become positive 14. Be careful of your signs. Okay, but I'm still not done with step 1. Step 1 is simplify each side. So on the left side, I could combine the negative 6 and the 10 right here. So I've got 15x, and when I combine those, I've got positive 4. Notice they were on the same side, so it's not like I changed the sign, to move it over. On the right side, I can combine the 6 and the 14. Wouldn't that be 20? So I've got negative 2x, positive 20. Okay, each side by itself is simplified. Now I just have to decide, okay, where do I want to move the x's? Do I want to move them to the left, or do I want to move them to the right? So let's say I'm going to choose to move all my x's to the left. So I know I'm going to move this over. Now I'm going to start to combine a few of the steps, because now that we're in Algebra 1, a little bit of this you can kind of do in your head. So if I add the 2x, on the left side I'm going to end up with 17x. But at the same time, don't I want the x's over here by themselves? So how about at the same time, I move that positive 4 to the other side. So there's my equal sign, and the opposite of addition is subtraction. So if I subtract 4 from the other side, aren't I going to end up with 16? Okay, I'm almost there. Final step. If I want the x by itself, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 17. And I'm going to end up with x equals 16 over 17. Okay. Let me see here. Now, letter F and G, we'll do a lot more of. Sorry, I just wanted to look and see where we were. We'll do a lot more problems like F and G when we get to the next section, but I'll go ahead and give you the example. So, based on our rules, we've said simplify each side. Okay, there's nothing I can do. I can't combine the 2/5 in with the minus 1/12. And then it says get all of the x's on the same side. So I'm going to, if that's a positive 3/5, I'm going to subtract 3/5. So I already have 2/5 in, and I'm going to subtract 3/5, and I'll actually figure out what that is in just a minute. And how about at the same time, since I want the x's on one side and everything else on the other, how about at the same time I just go ahead and add that 1/12? So on the right side, I've got my positive 1/12, but I already had that negative 3/4 over there. Okay, so I've gotten all my ends on the same side, so I have to figure out how do I combine 2/5 in and negative 3/5 in. Well, if they're like terms, and they are, don't you just add your number in front? So 2/5, negative 3/5, I already have a common denominator. If you combine that, wouldn't it become negative 1/5 in? And then on the right side, how am I going to combine those? Well, wouldn't I have to get a common denominator? Okay, so think about it. What is your common denominator? Isn't it 12? So that means the 1/12 is not going to change, but don't I need to multiply both of these by 3 in order for it to be a 12th? So on the right side, I actually have 1/12 minus 9/12. Wouldn't that be negative 8/12? Which will see, won't that simplify to be negative 2/3? So here's where I am. I have negative 1/5 in equals negative 2/3. Okay, next step. If I want to solve for n, how do I get rid of the 1/5? Well, it's a fraction, so I know it's kind of strange looking. One way to get rid of a fraction, well, let me back up. So I could divide both sides by 1/5, because isn't that 1/5 being multiplied by n? But here's kind of a little handy dandy shortcut. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the denominator. So if I want to get rid of the negative 1/5, why don't I just multiply both sides by negative 5? So I'm going to multiply that side by negative 5, and I'm going to multiply that side by negative 5. And so what I have over on the left, because the negative 5's cancel, all I have is 1 in. And on the right, think of this 5 as being over 1, I'm going to have positive 10 over 3. Okay. Now I'm going to hold off on letter G, because really we get into that in the next section. So that is really section 2.2.